Okay, let's switch gears now to advocacy. I think that, and then given time, I can wrap this up in about 5 minutes. I'll take questions for as long as you, well, not as long as you want me to, but so I can do it for a little bit longer. Let's talk about this. So one of the conversations that's going on in the, in many of the corridors of Congress, and this is literally hasn't been come out publicly yet so much. There have been a few statements published on it, but it's called the relative prioritization of exempt organizations. That's Washington speak for, does a soup kitchen or a shelter deserve a tax exemption more than a regional association of grant makers, or ASAE, or the American Petroleum Institute? That's going to be a conversation that is a conversation that people are having. Now, they're having that conversation because we are a $3.2 trillion sector. The difficulty in the conversation, however, is that the money is not with the American Petroleum Institute. They have a $50 million budget, but not a lot of money. Not a lot of money like organizations like YMCA's or major broad-stream charitable organizations that have a lot of money. And foundations clearly have a lot of money. And how foundations will be required to spend, and if they don't, what the excise taxes will be on that, whether or not an organization like ASAE is going to be able to continue its tax exemption, or whether there will be a relative prioritization. So what does that mean? Maybe we're exempt for 50%, but not 100%. Unrelated business income tax. It's always been a mystery to me that magazine advertising is subject to UBIT. Trade show revenue, no, not subject to UBIT. Interesting. Wonder when somebody's going to figure that out. And by the way, it's been the case since 1957 when the tax codes were written. So this is not a new phenomenon. But the fact is that things like investment income, non-profit tax proposals at the state level, if you start to drill down on this, what a lot of big users locally have done, particularly colleges and universities, is they don't pay real estate taxes, but now they've agreed to pay user fees. And so, under the guise of not having to pay real estate tax, so they're paying user fees. Well, user fee, real estate tax, kind of not so much different. And then, of course, we have issues around Form 990 and governance, and new rules for lobbying. I suspect that in this room there's probably not too much interest in lobbying. If I go to some other of our members, it's a big deal. But I should say lobbyists. How many of you are registered lobbyists in there? Yeah, that's what I suspected. Not that that's a good thing or a bad thing. I just didn't think it was that much part and parcel of what you do. So, as I said, members of Congress are pushing for review of all charitable provisions in the tax code. And again, this happens particularly when there are deficits. And as I indicated earlier, state, local, federal deficits are huge. They're not going to go away anytime soon. And Congress and states are looking for money. And so the other piece around this is in terms of Congress and what they're looking at is excess benefit transactions, executive compensation. These are big issues coming down. A further refining that I indicate who should be exempt and exempt organization regulation. And what the IRS is doing, I meet with the exempt division of the IRS about 3 or 4 times a year. I meet with Lois Lerner and her boss, and Steve Miller moved on from that. He was her boss. And we talk about this. What the IRS is doing with the governance is right now they're just tracking this data because what they want to do is match governance data with behavior and determine where the problems are. Because if they find problems, they think they will. The big issue that they're worried about right now is the fact that many organizations got their exemptions 50, 60 years ago. And what they're doing right now as an exempt organization is very, very, very different than what they got in the original purpose of their exemption law. And what they're looking at and thinking is that a lot of these organizations look a lot like businesses, disguised as charities. And it's not that anybody really did that necessarily on purpose. It's not that anybody was in the back room thinking, wow, I got my exemption 40 years ago, and now I'm going to do something different. It's that people are looking for money, and they're trying to figure out how to get it. And so they're doing a lot of things now that look a lot different than their original tax exemption. And the IRS is looking at that and is going to use it against our sector. And they're going to start pulling exemptions. It's going to happen. So we're looking at the, as you can see here, state budget gaps, 89 billion, 34 billion more than just the estimate 4 months ago. Some states, including Washington and South Dakota, have already proposed taxing nonprofit membership dues. Fortunately, we were able to work with local people in the states, and those bills were defeated. It's actually, believe it or not, it's interesting. Politics is that, and you probably know this already, but it's so much easier. Not that Washington's a small state, but so much easier to get things done in a South Dakota or in Iowa than it is in a New York or Pennsylvania or California. Particularly when, you know, a lot of those members of Congress and the Senate come from the small states. A couple phone calls from the constituents locally at home make a big difference than when you're in South Dakota and when you're in California. So, in any event, a lot happened in there. We talked about this, as you know, many of you know, I think, you know, the IRS did a hospital study 3 years ago. They just completed their higher education study this past year, and I'm not sure what the next target group will be, although there was a group of about, my old organization included, about 1,000 charitable organizations that received letters from the IRS asking for disclosures. And they're particularly looking at things like executive comp and things like that. And you may have seen that that's one of the places where Boys and Girls Clubs got publicly cited. But there'll be more of that coming down the pipe too. And what Congress is really looking at, and some of the language that's going on there, is that executive compensation should not, in the nonprofit sector, should not exceed what the president makes. In fact, in the state of New Jersey, maybe many of you may have seen that I may have the legislation a little bit wrong, but if you get any state grant money as a nonprofit in New Jersey, the top salary I think you can pay is $120,000 a year, regardless of how large you are. So this is all happening in real time, folks. We're not making this stuff up, and it's happening. And I think all of us need to be very vigilant as a sector. As a sector. The other piece they're looking at is whether or not some of the governance issues, as many of you know, again, conflict of interest, whistleblower, document retention policies, all part of Sarbanes-Oxley, are required by nonprofits as well as public companies to have those particular policies. But the IRS is looking for, are there other policies that should be required, like those three are? Are there other policies that should be required by nonprofits such as those three are? And so again, these are issues that you know are really happening again in real time, and I think over the next 3 to 5 years, as electronic filing really plays out. I mean, you know, we just saw the first burst of electronic filing. As those files become more enriched over the next 5 years with data, there'll be a lot of opportunities for some significant data mining there that aren't available to